Hello, everyone, and welcome to our NAMI Multnomah Evening with the Expert. This is the second in a series of 3 this May. My name is Taylor Madden. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at NAMI Multnomah. Tonight, we have Chaplain Greg Widmer and Chaplain Rebecca Morris to talk about the Compassionate Warrior Training for Reintegration. We're going to talk a little bit about the program. I think they're going to let me share a little bit about my experience with it this year, and if some of the other individuals who are currently in it are open to sharing, that would be really cool as well. We have a couple in this room already, so I will let Greg take it away.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you to NAMI Multnomah for this opportunity to speak this evening. It really is good to be with people who either are veterans or care about things that are relevant to veterans. So thank you all so much for being here. As Taylor said, my name is Greg Widmer, and I serve as a staff chaplain at VA Portland Healthcare System. And my partner in crime is Rebecca Morris, who's bouncing back these days between both the Portland and the Vancouver campus. And what we're going to talk about this evening is a set of programming that Rebecca developed that helps bring veterans home. Plain and simple, a program that has been birthed out of Rebecca's story that has touched the lives of many veterans to help, and I'm a veteran myself, so I'll say us or we, to help bring us home from all that training and everything that we went through. I think I like to introduce what we're sharing as the opposite of boot camp. You know, for those of us that were in the military, we got a lot of training to be all that we could be and to become a soldier or a Marine or whatever else. But what about coming home? What about unlearning some behaviors that were good in the military, but that don't really serve us very well in the civilian life? So I'll say that. I'm wondering, Rebecca, if you would like to share just a little bit about where CWTR came from and kind of the context of where it birthed out of?
Sure. Before I do that, though, I just want to say thank you as well, Taylor, and to the many veterans that have been in our program, and to the peers, and to NAMI. It's really been an incredible journey to, I think of Carrie Melda, who came and spoke in our program a few years ago, and just how we've started, continued, and then deepened this relationship with the community. And so it's very humbling. I also want to say thanks to you, Greg. It has been an absolute honor to work with you. And I think where it fits in my personal story is having been raised by Vietnam veterans who had PTSD, and knowing that not only does moral injury impact the veterans, it impacts families and it impacts communities. And so tonight, being able to have the opportunity, I think the invitation that we would like to offer to you is to imagine that this might be a part of your story that you know about. It also, I hope, will speak to some individuals who might be able to say, wow, I didn't know. I actually did not know how intimately this connects not only with my story or Greg's story or Taylor's or the many veterans or NAMI Multnomah, but all of the other people who have joined us this evening. So maybe that's what I'd like to say to begin, Greg. Thank you.
So I'd like to invite us in a way that we start off our Compassionate Warrior training times together with just a moment of mindfulness and grounding. I know I can use it always, and I'm sure others might as well, but let's just take a moment to arrive in this moment and to just be present. You might be sliding into this meeting from one after the other. Maybe you've been looking forward to this day for a while. Might have had a good day or a bad day, but we're here now. We want to say welcome. Check in with your breath. You don't need to change it, just notice it. Notice if you're breathing easy or if maybe it's a little pressured. As we talk about the veteran experience and coming home, it's not solely from the head that we want to talk, but it's also from the heart, from a deeper way of being. As a veteran who has PTSD, I'm keenly aware that PTSD often shoots us up into our heads. And that's not just a veteran thing, that's a human thing. And so part of the healing process is being reconnected to our bodies, coming back in to the here and the now. And so this is how we start our groups. We start with mindfulness, we start with meditation, and then normally we would have a poem that we would read to share, and we would invite insights around the poem, things that jump out, and we're less concerned about what people think than what they feel and what they experience. But I think it's worthwhile putting all of this into the broader context, kind of like I started out with the veteran experience. Because while we're talking about compassionate warrior training for reintegration, you'll hear us use the acronym CWTR. That's our reintegration program. That's the end of a series of programs that we call progressions. And so I think it's worth spending a couple minutes just talking about progressions in general, and then where CWTR fits in that. Rebecca, is there anything you want to add at this point before we maybe do a little overview of progressions?
I think the only other thing I would want to invite folks is to take good care of yourselves tonight. We know that this sometimes the topic is a very sensitive, tender-hearted topic. So just being aware of taking good care of yourselves as well. Other than that, I would say take it away, Greg.
So as I mentioned, your typical veteran that is being discharged from the military doesn't have a ton of resources for getting back into the civilian life. As a VA employee, I know that the VA tries really hard. And I'm thankful that there's programs like NAMI Multnomah that are able to fill in the gaps and to catch veterans where the VA just simply can't. But one of the things that we do is we have an initial group that's a stabilization group. So what's the first step in the process for veterans? It's stabilization. And this is based off of Judith Herman, who taught at Harvard Medical School for a while. She was a trauma therapist, and I believe she's retired now. But she wrote a watershed book called Trauma and Recovery in 1997. And Rebecca took the framework of how do you go from the beginning of stabilization through trauma processing in the middle to reintegration at the end. How do you move along that progressions? And so our progressions is a modified clinical model based off of Judith Herman's work. So our first group that we have is called Lodestone. Lodestone is our basic PTSD and spirituality group. For veterans out there that are enrolled in the VA healthcare and want to get involved, this is the first step. You can't jump right into compassionate warrior training if you're a veteran. That's the end of our progressions. But the invitation is wide open to be part of Lodestone. And we also have a female-only version of that called Women's Spiritual Values. But these are groups that meet weekly, and the idea is to provide stabilization, to provide basic orientation where we have mental health interacting with spirituality. You might call that trauma-informed spirituality. And that's what these basic groups are all about. The second phase of progressions is trauma processing. Now, for some of you that are therapists and providers out there, or some of you that have been around the VA for a long time, you probably already know what this is. But just so we're all on the same page, trauma processing speaks to working with a licensed therapist and going through tough PTSD work. Within the VA, the two gold standards that are used are cognitive processing therapy, CPT, or prolonged exposure, PE. Those are the two main avenues that are evidence-based that the VA uses, for better or worse. Those are the two primary modalities for trauma processing. And one of the things that we noticed is that, or I should say that Rebecca noticed first, and I've had the privilege to be a part of for the last couple of years, is that while the PTSD treatment is good and it's necessary, it's generally insufficient. So I'll tell you from my own story. I'm an Iraq war veteran, and let's just say that I've experienced a lot of trauma around audio stuff. And so I would freak out around loud, sudden noises. Well, thankfully, the PTSD treatment helped me out where I stopped freaking out at loud, sudden noises, but I still felt like crap. And I still felt like, all right, I'm living a less hyper-vigilant life. But is there anything more to it? Is there any more treatment, any more groups that I can go through? And I wish that there had been a group that addressed what Rebecca talked about as moral injury. So, Rebecca, it's good to see you on camera. Why don't I pause for a minute lest I ramble too much, and maybe at this time ask for questions so far, see what people are present to, and then we can continue. And we also have several of our peer support specialists that are here as well. So invite you guys to fill in the gaps as you see fit. So does anybody have any questions thus far or comments that you want to bring up? If we had to be completely healed to be helpers, I wouldn't be here because I'm still very much on my own healing journey as well. And so I think there's a model of the wounded healer that we can embody, somebody who doesn't have it all figured out. And that's one of the things I love about this programming is you can check the BS at the door. Chaplain Morris is one of the most skilled spiritual care providers I've ever met. And she will see right through any bullcrap real quickly. And it's an invitation into being present. So I don't know where you're at in your individual journey, and this probably isn't the place to go too far down that road. But I do appreciate that you're sensitive and open and you're getting help as you're helping others. To me, that seems like a really good model.
I'd like to step in for one moment, and I'd like you to know you can personally reach out to us at any time. And I am also humbled and honored that you're here speaking so openly tonight. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. It means a lot to all of us. And what we do know about moral injury is moral injury is a wound that is created in community. And the only way that we're able to come to some reconciliation is to do it together in community. So you've helped others just by sharing tonight, I'm sure, including myself.
It's been for a handful of years, it's been around at the Portland VA. And I think this is a good point to talk about our second phase, which is a moral injury group called ACT for moral injury. ACT being the acronym Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And so after a veteran does trauma processing, if the PTSD is managed and their symptoms are under control, they are welcome to join our ACT for Moral Injury group, which is a 10-week group. And so that's been going on. How many years, Rebecca, has it been that you first started ACT for Moral Injury?
I want to say that we began in 2016 or 2017.
Mm-hmm.
We started were in the ending of 2016. But what I will say also is when I was in Denver, I started in the inpatient PTSD unit in 2009. And at that time, we weren't talking about moral injury when I arrived, but we had just started talking about moral injury as I was moving to Portland, to Oregon.
Perspective of a Vietnam veteran, this is very new. It's been going on for a few years locally, and you know, I won't spend all my time praising Rebecca. I think the world of her, but the programming has caught the attention of the VA and DoD as a possible best practice for treating moral injury. It's one thing to know about moral injury. A lot of people are just learning about moral injury, it seems like. It's another thing to treat it. And just like Rebecca said, moral injury occurs in community and it also heals in community. That's why these groups and even times like tonight are so important that we're together. It's because there's something about the way we are as humans, for whatever reason, that groups can either be really damaging or really healing. And our hope is that it's the latter when they come to work with mental health and chaplain service.
Right on time. And I hear your passion and I hear your broken heart. And this is the exact place. And this is how we begin, is with leaders and human beings like you who are holding what you just spoke to. I want to invite everybody to just feel, we just saw Taylor put her hand on her heart. If you felt that, I'm going to invite you to put your hand on your heart so that you can see that's the impact. And being able to hold it, it meaning the moral injury that you're speaking to, and speaking to it so bravely. This is how you begin. And it's very obvious to me that being a peer and being a leader in the peer world is, well, you're in the right place. I would say a couple of other things. I would love to invite you as well, reach out and have a conversation. We're also part of the training that we're starting to expand into is community and clergy training as part. And we have a 3-part series. We just spoke this past week on military sexual trauma. moral injury and suicide prevention. And then in May, we will speak about intimate partner violence, moral injury, and suicide prevention. And then in June, we're going to speak about sexual orientation, gender identity, moral injury, and suicide prevention. So, how about if you and I make sure we have a conversation between now and then, and we can maybe even have you be on our subject matter expert panel with us as part of community clergy training.
Thank you. I hear, where you talk about it, and from my personal experience as well, like a comparison thing. And I just want to throw it out there that you're not alone in that. And even veterans, I don't think, are alone in that. So a lot of, I think, what CWTR does too in getting community clergy involved is that we can like connect the dots. For the longest time, I didn't think that my problems were big enough to receive peer support through NAMI, and like I was downgrading what I was dealing with and thinking that, oh, well, what I am diagnosed with isn't enough mental illness. That's not fair, and it wasn't fair to me. And I hindered my own recovery for a little while, and I'm glad I came around. But I just, I think that a lot of times as humans, we compare ourselves, and I don't know. Wanted to offer some space for that and just say that you're more than enough, and we're so blessed to have you here for NAMI. So I just wanted to say I'm grateful for you.
So we've talked about progressions being a 3-phase approach to bringing veterans home. The first phase is stabilization, and we have our PTSD and spirituality group. The next phase, phase 2, requires people outside of Chaplain Morris and myself. That's why we work very closely with our mental health colleagues. It requires psychologists, counselors, social workers to do trauma processing. When a veteran completes trauma processing, then if they want, they're welcome to come into ACT for moral injury. That's a 10-week group. And then if a veteran completes ACT for moral injury and they still want to continue with some further reintegration in their lives, then we have what you guys came here today to hear about, compassionate warrior training for reintegration, CWTR. That is the final phase, is reintegration. And it's a long program. It can last from 6 months to this cohort, because we're doing it all virtually, and some of our peers that are part of that right now are joining us today as well. It's good to see you guys. It's going to be about a year-long process, and so I'm wondering how we should start talking about CWTR, Rebecca, if we want to just talk about the grief process first. Or...
I'm wondering, Greg, I know you said you're not maybe on your work computer. Do you have the PowerPoint with you?
I don't, unfortunately.
It's okay. I think I'll shift to my work computer, and if you want to start sharing that, then I'll actually show the video or the visual, because I think that's really helpful for people to see how it looks. So go ahead and I'll shift computers.
Okay, sounds good. So what's kind of interesting, in order to facilitate these groups, you have to go through it as a participant. So I've had the privilege of going through Lodestone, ACT for Moral Injury, and CWTR as a participant. And the reason I say that is when you finally get to CWTR, you're all excited and you're like, here's this cutting edge program that's going to bring veterans home. How are we going to start? Grief. Lots of grief work. In order to go forward, in order to go through the healing process properly, we do a deep dive into grief. Several weeks of going back over that which we've lost, that which we've mourned, that which we need to grieve. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to communicate is my perception is that grief isn't always talked about. It isn't something that is, you know, out in the mass media and stuff, sometimes here and there. But one of the most healing things that we can do, and one of the things that's most necessary, is to do grief work. And so that's how Compassionate Warrior Training for Reintegration starts. Pre-COVID times, we would use sweat lodges, and we would start with what's called the Death Lodge. And so very intentionally, not shying away from the inner shadows that we all have.
As a community member, let me let someone in real fast. As a community member and not a veteran myself, I feel so blessed and just grateful to experience this with everyone. So humble. I started therapy again. I've been in therapy before, but I restarted therapy last January, and then CWTR started in November. So January through November, I had done a lot of grief processing with my therapist, and I thought I was feeling really good, and I was ready to kind of take on CWTR as like a bridge, like come to NAMI, and I didn't realize how much I was going to feel with everybody else, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And there were a couple times, where I was, Rebecca and Greg walk us through, acting out some of the grief work, and I was on the ground crying, and with you guys, with the peers in this room, which was powerful. And then my partner afterward is like, wow, that's real stuff. Like, he had no idea what I was doing. He thought he had no idea. So even in a virtual setting, we got through some real stuff together, and I was just so grateful for that. And what a year to practice grief so heavy, like, it was very powerful. So thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. And you highlight a role that we have. We have our veteran participants. I like to say they're taking it for credit. And then we have our community members. They may be veterans, they may not be veterans, who come alongside and support the process as well. So we have both veterans, we have community members, and then there are peer support specialists who went through the programming last year when I was going through it as a participant, and they've come back now as peer support specialists. So lots of different roles, lots of community involved with this.
So I decided I'm not going to put it in presentation mode, Greg, and you can tell me what you want us to see. Where do you want me to go?
Well, let's highlight that for just a moment. What you're seeing right here is a VA map of cutting edge sites, 6 of them that are treating suicide prevention, and the others that are treating moral injury. So you can see in Portland here, one of the things I'm really proud of, and I'm proud of Rebecca for paving the way, is that we are doing some pioneering work around treating moral injury. And you can see other sites around the country where that's happening. All that to say is, if you have veterans in our catchment area, we don't just talk about moral injury, but we work on moral healing. So it's just good to be aware what's going on in your backyard. This here is the 3 stages that I was talking about, from stabilization, trauma processing, to reintegration. So I mentioned only a couple of our groups for stabilization. But we also have a 6-week grief and loss group. We have groups that are in RRTP, the Residential Rehabilitation Treatment Program, inpatient and outpatient mental health groups. So if you go to the next slide,
One thing I also want to highlight, mainly for the veterans here to know, is we've taken the same model, and this progressions model is also staff facing. So what we teach, the way that we teach and hold community for our staff, is that moral injury is inherent in the work that we do at the VA. And it has a big impact on staff members and moral distress. And so a lot of the work we're doing is sharing that, knowing that veterans have moral injury, that the staff often becomes the welcoming home committee or the safe haven, at least a little bit, in their care at the VA. And so we do the same kind of work with staff facing. I say that because we believe very, very strongly that staff care is part of the progressions program and part of veteran care. Because if staff can really hold and understand that moral injury is inherent in the moral distress that we feel often in the work, that helps with better veteran care ultimately, when the staff really has a great understanding around the ethical implications for self-care in this kind of work. Where to now, Greg?
why don't we go to the slides that give us a little vignette of phase 1 veterans, and then we can go into CWTR. So just to be a little more concrete when we talk about the different phases. Of a veteran who's in phase 1, they might be new to the VA. They might be new to mental health treatment. They could be recently in recovery. Oftentimes they're going to still see the world in black and white. But they're able to sit in a group. That's a prerequisite that we have, is that somebody's group appropriate and at least open to other ideas. Not that you have to believe them, but at least open to being in a diverse group. So somebody who wouldn't be ready for phase 1 is somebody with unaddressed complex trauma. Go to the next slide. So a veteran who has done trauma processing is in this phase, which we kind of call 2.5. They have PTSD, or they might have PTSD, but it's probably well managed. Most of you would know that PTSD doesn't just go away, but there's ways of treating it and managing it. A veteran in this phase is attuned to their own experience of guilt and shame, and able to take a deeper look at the meaning and significance of their moral injury. And they're at the beginning stages of understanding paradox and mystery, and can embrace irreconcilable tension.
On that note, Greg, I actually pulled up paradox. I wondered if we wanted to move just into a brief experiential after just kind of talking about that.
That's probably a good idea. Go for it.
Can you still see my
Can you zoom
screen?
in just a little?
Of course I can. How's that?
That's pretty good.
So Greg was talking about how in the beginning of group, we often will share a poem. And so I'm gonna ask Rob if you're up for reading this. And then if you'll read it the first time, I'll read it the second time. And what our invitation is I'm dyslexic, so I have to read stuff. But if you're not, the invitation is even to close your eyes and listen with the ears of your heart, just so you can understand what we're talking about when we talk about these paradoxes, being able to hold the tensions of paradox. And some of our peers, including Alejandro, have shown that ability. Doesn't mean stuff goes away, right? So at this point, if you're comfortable, feel free to close your eyes and we'll just take you through a little of a heart experiential. If you want to take it away, Rob.
Paradox by Gunilla Norris. It is a paradox that we encounter so much internal noise when we first try to sit in silence. It is a paradox that expressing pain releases pain. It is a paradox that keeping still can lead us so fully into life and being. Our minds do not like paradoxes. We want things to be clear so we can maintain our illusions of safety. Certainty breeds tremendous smugness. We each possess a deeper level of being, however, which loves paradox. It knows that summer is already growing like a seed in the depth of winter. It knows that the moment we are born, we begin to die. It knows that all of life shimmers in the shades of becoming. That shadow and light are always together, the visible mingled with the invisible. When we sit in stillness, we are profoundly active. Keeping silent, we can hear the roar of existence. Through our willingness to be the one we are, we become one with everything.
About where you are is so much about what the moral injury work is. And when we talk about phase two is being able to start to have those conversations in public in front of people.
So our veterans that want to participate in compassionate warrior training, they would be in phase 3. And notice that there's a couple prerequisites. It's somebody that's completed ACT for moral injury. Veterans at this phase are moving from continuing to utilize acute and crisis mental health services to greater engagement in their lives. And they begin to realize that their wound can become a gift. They begin to realize that their wound can become a gift and that they can engage in community and give back in service. So in this phase, the veteran also learns about spiritual community integration pathways, a bridge between mental health and community clergy. That was some of the other training that Rebecca was mentioning. Now goes by the name Community Clergy Training Program. Rebecca, do you want to talk about the 3 phases of CWTR?
My thought is to have you continue, and then we'll start for questions if that's okay.
Yeah,
Greg, please.
definitely. So just like we talked about 3 phases, I kind of laugh when it's like, well, of course we have 3 phases for CWTR as well. That just makes things nice and neat. But in all seriousness, there are 3 phases. And we talked about phase 1 of compassionate warrior training is the death lodge and grieving. This is when veterans are consolidating the work that they've done in mental health services, revisiting all that they have lost, grieving, and making room for new beginnings. So that's phase 1 of CWTR. In the middle, and this is where we're at currently with our current cohort of veterans, is we're in the whole health programming phase. And this is when veterans work on a progression from grief into whole health coaching. So we draw upon the whole health practices that are inside the VA. Phase 3 then is the self-design ceremony and the self project. This self-design ceremony and welcome home ritual with community support. And in this phase, through ceremony and committed actions, veterans are intentionally reintegrating into communities and offering their gifts to others. In a sense, the third phase is really when autonomy and personal expression starts to shine, and we provide encouragement and community, but veterans themselves then are thinking, okay, what does this mean for my life? What am I going to do from here on out? So, and Rebecca's typing in also that in phase 2, we've instituted this year a myth with a redemptive ending. Just watching you type.
I guess part of why I did that intentionally is so much of the work is about what happens in the present moment. And as we build, we are building together regularly, and we do it out in the open. And so compassionate warrior training is, although it's very intentional, it's also what I would say seemingly informal until you realize it's incredibly formal. But what we do is we work together, and even that might sound like a paradox, but the process is meant to be a bit disorienting. And when individuals can learn to stay oriented in their own life while the world around becomes disorienting, that training container, I can actually do this in that crazy world out there. And so we try to mimic or create a training ground so that individuals can start to see all that they've gathered from skills, tools, and to start apply it, and they contribute back to the program as well. We have a tagline that says, we hope that you don't notice where this program ends and your life begins. So we try and build it in a way that people aren't wondering what's next in their VA programming. We kind of hope that they get a little bored of us. And when they kind of don't show up on occasion and start apologizing because their life has taken them away, it's a good part of the assessment process that we are succeeding. Maybe that's the other piece that I would love to add. Taylor, I'm wondering if you notice where you might think you'd like to take this next, or other questions or thoughts or things you would like us to address, or that you would like to share.
This is the first time you've put me on a spot, so I, no, I love it, thank you. I don't know, I guess, you know, after what you just said, it kind of brought me back to my opening where I like stumbled over your name, even though I've known you for a while now. And I was like, you know what? Imperfection is authenticity, which is approachable, which is we're all in this together and we're all stumbling through this together. And so I guess I appreciated you saying that, because it took me back to the beginning. And honestly, the last time I did an evening with the expert event for veterans was in September of last year, before CWTR. And I have to say, I noticed the difference in myself and my ability to navigate uncertainty and paradox a little bit better, just as an example. So thank you.
Go through the programming and go through Compassionate Warrior training for reintegration. It culminates with a welcome home ceremony that's open to the public. And this is a time when veterans go through a quilting ceremony that is based on the Native American tradition that for many, many centuries would welcome home their warriors with a quilt being one of the highest like gifts that you can receive. And what's really cool about that, having gone through it, is when you get the quilt and you're welcomed home, there's this tangible physical experience of warmth and of comfort. Yep. And so what we're doing is welcoming home our veterans in mind, body, and soul. You know, a lot of us have left the military a long time ago, but this is just a tangible way to welcome people home, and it's a tremendous ceremony that occurs in November, and would love for people here that would like to attend and just kind of see what it's about and support the veterans that have been working really hard. Attend that welcome home ceremony. Rebecca, what else do we want to say about the welcome home ceremony or at this time, or should we open it up to more question and answer?
I think the only other thing is we have community members, but we have community veterans that also join. And so we've learned from so many of you of what does that mean when we're having a community conversation. And so we know that we've got community members. We actually have community veterans. We have initiated elders like mentors. We have peer support specialists. We have participants. We have students that come in, and we have students who train. So it can be quite a robust group of individuals on any given evening sometimes. I will say, because of the pandemic, we haven't had sweat lodges, but we've been able to create and use some other unique mythopoetic types of soul encounters, the best I can say, experientials. So we've been able to get even more creative than ever in this past year, as Taylor was suggesting. I think as we look at the last few minutes, just invite any other questions that you might have. Otherwise, maybe we even end with a mindfulness or a meditation, Greg, to just ground individuals as we close for the evening. Does anyone else have questions? Teaching mindfulness on the spot is, would you be open to closing us with a mindfulness just to ground and a departure meditation? So before you do that, do we have any other questions, thoughts? We always open that in formal prayer. When we're doing a formal community clergy, we open in prayer and we try and offer mindfulness. In something that's a little less formal or in groups, we stay in probably what would be considered as a little bit more neutral ground around mindfulness. And if folks wanted to offer prayer, if people want to talk openly about God or atheism, about agnosticism or existentialism, logotherapy or science, what we try and do is create the neutral ground so that someone like you can speak openly as well and say, here's what my perspective is. Can I learn more about this other perspective? So, and then also inviting you to always give your perspective, always. And that's the space that we as VA chaplains are, that's part of our sacred, I don't know, task, I would say, is to try and create, is open up of a space so that someone like yourself, who might be Christ-based, or someone who's agnostic, or who's, I mean, in theory, if a person who was a satanic worshiper, the hope would be everybody could come and get curious about what those experiences are, knowing that every single one of us probably has an experience around moral injury that we could all benefit from and for in those conversations, you know. What is one or two words? What are one or two words? And this is another skill that we use in all of our programming. What are you present to? So if you close your eyes maybe and come back into your own heart, what is it that you are present to right now? And if you can't figure it out, look at these eyes. Think of the stories that were shared tonight, the bravery. And feel free to type those into the chat box or unmute yourself and share a couple of words of what you're taking away, how to anchor this conversation so that you don't forget what you've learned tonight from all of this bravery. Taylor says gratitude, experience. Tyler says connection, curiosity. What are you present to? Mike says need and use of universality. Greg says gratitude, new courageous faces. Marianne says caring and giving meaning. Anything else that a new community, Bob says? Well, on that note, Joanne, how about if you impromptu give us a closing goodbye?
First of all, thank you, Greg and Rebecca, for doing this. It's always insightful. So in closing, I'd like you to just take a couple deep breaths, let the air travel into your belly and up towards your neck. Fill those lungs and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Sometimes in life, I just hold my breath. I don't even know why. So it helps to just take a few deep breaths. And as you sit there, you could close your eyes or just leave your eyes partially open. And notice what's around you. Notice the air. What does it feel like? What are the sounds around you? What does it smell like? What does your chair feel like that you're sitting on? What does the floor feel like under your feet? Can you feel a foot down from your feet into the earth, knowing that Mother Earth is always supporting us? Notice what you're thinking about right now. Notice where your tension might be in your body. Is it in your shoulders? Can you let them relax, let them down? Notice your face. Can you let all the muscles in your face just relax? Just telling your face, there's nothing to do. There's nobody to impress. There's nowhere to go. And take a few more deep breaths. And just let yourself relax and be grateful that you're here joining us tonight, and be grateful for the life that you have, even if it isn't always the one that you wanted. So with the next couple breaths, come back to the room and be grateful. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Greg. I think the last thing I want to say is just really honoring Greg, thinking about he was not a chaplain in the military. He was a combat veteran, and he's worked through his own work and has come alongside of me strong, not knowing what the heck he was getting himself into. Yeah, I want to do that moral injury work. Careful what you ask for, right? And I could not have imagined a more humble and a more just skilled craftsman to be able to work alongside of, to help continue to stabilize and do this work. So Greg, I say thank you to you as a veteran as well, and truly one of the best chaplains I've ever met in my entire life, in all of your existentiality. Eat well, sleep well, love well, play well, take good care of yourselves. Reach out if there's any way that we can. Taylor, you're welcome to give our information to anyone. You can reach out if we can support in any ways. And again, thank you all.
Thanks all so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca and Greg, and literally everybody who shared tonight. Alyssa will send out an email tomorrow with some resources, Rebecca and Greg's emails, and some other follow-up stuff. So we will be in touch. Maybe some information on volunteering if y'all want to get involved with NAMI now, and all those things. So we will talk very soon. So thank you, everyone.